In the interest of time, I'm going to cover the history of RNAi development very, very quickly. Basically, it's taken a long time. It's been about 20 years. First paper published in 1996, Nobel Prize awarded in 2006, and now in 2017, we finally have the first molecule or compound, impeticerin, which has made it all the way through phase 3 and is poised for a regulatory filing, I assume sometime within the next 6 months or so. So we finally have human proof of concept that you can take an RNA and deliver it effectively and treat a disease. A common part of development of RNAi therapeutics is how are you going to deliver it? There's two ways to do that. There's the lipid nanoparticle approach, which we've taken at Arbutus, and there's also the GalNAc approach, which a number of companies, as shown here, have taken. We have a GalNAc, Arrowhead, Dicerna, quite a few companies. Alnylam had one. I guess it was announced today that was no longer, but now they're working with Vir, who will pick up the mantle on the HBV approaches there. So there's two different approaches, and both of them have their pros and cons, and I'll talk a bit of those about a bit of those as we go through the talk today. I'm not going to dwell on this at all. I think we all know the current state of affairs with the treatment for hepatitis B, and the goal, of course, is to increase these rates. I do believe, as we saw in hepatitis C, that you're going to see a stair-step of improvements over time. We're not going to go from now to cure. We're going to go from 2% to 4% to 10%, et cetera. And I think we'd all be very, very happy to be here a year from now and talking about our consistent 10% functional cure rate. I think that would be great, but I think we are going to see that over the years, and it's nice to see so many companies in the room and so much investment going into hepatitis B to try and get there as quickly as we can. At Arbutus, we think about this quite simply. We call this our keys to therapeutic success in hepatitis B, as shown here. Number one, simply reduce viral DNA and antigens. We can do these with existing drugs very well. Nukes are very, very good at this. Capsid inhibitors, I think there's at least 7 capsid inhibitors in development, which Angela will talk to you about next. RNAi approaches as well. RNAi approaches also work on blocking S antigen production. There's also compounds out there that look at release of that. And then starving cccDNA formation, again, capsid inhibitors as well as RNAi approaches can do this too. But the second part, which has been a big focus of today, has been around the immune system, and it's about activating or reactivating the patient immune response to the hepatitis B virus. And again, you can think about doing that two ways. You can do that directly by somehow about stimulating the immune system or reawakening it, or you can do it indirectly by driving S antigen down and letting nature take its course on its own and seeing a natural recurrence of the immune response there. And then you can also think about things like PD-1s, STING agonists, et cetera. Again, the goal getting to this functional cure and then eventually perhaps a sterilizing cure one day if Anuj and his colleagues are successful at Gilead. I'm not going to dwell on this slide very long. This was actually part of a poster that was presented at EASL last year. It talks about the main steps and how an RNAi therapeutic works. Again, to make the point, it requires two things. It requires effective delivery, and it requires effective triggers, so the siRNA triggers. The compound I'm going to talk to you about today, ARB-1467, uses the lipid nanoparticle technology, which is shown here on this slide. And it also uses a combination of 3 different triggers, all targeted at conserved regions, hitting all 4 transcripts of the HBV genome. So this allows us to see reductions in HBV DNA, core antigen, S antigen, et cetera. And we think by hitting multiple transcripts like this, we're able to drive down numerous viral antigens and hopefully have the effect of helping the immune system wake back up. ARB-1467's first phase 2 study was the one shown here. It was a study in patients with hepatitis B. They're chronically infected, of course, on nuke therapy for an extended period of time. We treated these patients for 3 months. It was a single dose, once a month. The drug is given IV. We actually ran the study in hepatitis E antigen negative patients as well as positive patients because we wanted to compare E antigen negative and positive at the same dose level. So it was a dose escalation. We started out on the upper left there at a 0.2 mg per kg dose monthly in E negative patients, cohorts of 8. We then escalated after showing safety and activity up to the 0.4 level, again in E antigen negatives, and then we concurrently enrolled another cohort of E antigen positive patients in the red. There's a 4th cohort down there, which I'm not going to show you the data for today because it's going to be presented in a number of presentations at the AASLD meeting. But this was actually based upon the initial results we were seeing in the first 3 cohorts, so we amended the protocol and added a cohort of biweekly dosing to see if we could drive S antigen even lower. Here are the data from the first part of this study then, and just to orient you, so placebos across the top, the light blue line is the 0.2 mg per kg in E negatives. The red line is 0.4 milligrams per kilogram in E antigen negatives. And then E antigen positive patients are at 0.4 are shown in the dark blue. And what you can see is an additive stepwise reduction in hepatitis B surface antigen as measured peripherally over time. Each time you gave a successive dose, you saw a further decline in the patient's S antigen level. And we got down to almost a log reduction at the 0.4 milligram per kilogram dose by the end of that. You'll also notice that halfway between each of those doses at day 15 is where the nadir was. So hence the addition of that fourth cohort then when we started dosing every other week to try and hit the nadir with the next dose. And again, you'll be able to see that data. It was also released in a top-line press release on our website. To cut to the chase, it was well over a log in the mean reductions which we saw in the biweekly cohort. Here's some numbers to show you. Cohorts 1, 2, and 3 across in lines there as we just talked about. So the means, which we saw, there were about 0.6 to 0.9, 0.6 at the lowest dose, 0.7 to 0.9 in terms of mean reductions in S antigens over this 3 monthly doses. Maximum responses seen across the cohorts up to 1.6 log maximums. And then if you look at the number of patients who hit certain thresholds, such as greater than a half log reduction or greater than a log reduction, you can see if you combine the 0.4 milligram patients together, because we're really not seeing a difference in E antigen negative and positive patients here. You see 5 of 11 of these patients actually had at least a 1 log reduction during the 3-month dosing period. In terms of safety, a key part about this is being able to deliver these therapeutics safely, and we see a generally safe and well-tolerated profile here. Nothing really significant to talk about. There was one individual who discontinued early who had a hepatitis E superinfection, which we were able to figure out in the course of multiple laboratory investigations in trying to do this. But we're not seeing anything significant in terms of safety. I would say as well, prior to 1467, Arbutus actually had an oncology program with a PLK1 trigger where we actually administered that one at similar dose levels weekly for up to a year, and we're able to do that safely as well. And now you're seeing Alnylam now with 2-year data with the patisiran program. So I think the concerns about the safety of being able to deliver these lipid nanoparticles has been put aside a little bit. So now what to do next? So one nice thing we've been able to assemble at Arbutus is really a translational approach to what we're doing in research. We have a very strong research group led by Dr. Mike Sophia, who I worked with at Pharmasset many, many years ago. And he's put together a very strong team where we're able to meet with them and really say, hey, the next thing we want to do in the clinic is this. Can you guys do that in animals first? Let's see what it looks like. So we designed an experiment with them where we wanted to look at the combination now of 1467, or in this case we use 1740, which is a similar RNAi product, in the addition of an immune response modifier such as interferon. So we wanted to see what would happen when we drove S antigen down and then added interferon into that, because again, we were very limited on the tools we have to use in the clinic today. We have nukes, which we can use out there. We have 1467, which we can use. And then we have interferon, which is really the only other accessible immune response modifier at the moment. So we ran a study in the Phoenix Bio study, and just to orient you, S antigen is there on the left, and the green line there at the bottom is the RNAi product. So as expected, you're seeing nice reductions in S antigen with the RNAi, not so much with the other molecules, which include interferon there in the pink, and tenofovir in the black, and then AB423, which is a capsid inhibitor, is in the red. When you look at serum HBV DNA, you'll notice that everything drops HBV DNA down except for the control animals. And you're seeing as well the RNAi is also dropping HBV DNA, which I alluded to earlier. When we then look at combinations, now we have triple combinations, which we're looking at here, as well as doubles. So the vehicle is the black. The capsid plus the interferon is the purple triangle. The RNAi plus the capsid plus entecavir is the purple one, the second one from the bottom. But then when you add interferon, you see on the left-hand side, you get an enhanced reduction in S antigen. So by adding interferon to stimulate the immune system, you're able to see a bit more reduction in S antigen in these patients. In terms of DNA, you really don't see any difference when you look at the entecavir versus the PEG interferon group added on to the triple with the RNAi. Now, I mentioned the immune response. So again, this is the same data showing you the enhancement of that S antigen decline with interferon. On the right-hand side is actually looking at liver levels of hepatitis B surface antigen in the bars, And the dots are liver interferon alpha as measured by human RNA. So upregulation of RNA, because these are human hepatocytes, if you remember, implanted into that immunocompromised mouse. So what you can see with the vehicle, you see high levels of S antigen, low levels of human interferon-producing RNA. When you see the combination with 1740, the RNAi plus just entecavir, you see that the S antigen goes down and the RNA goes up a bit. But then when you add interferon onto the siRNA, you see S antigen goes way down and the RNA goes up much more. And you see then if you take away 1740, in the last column there, you see less of an effect on S antigen and a moderate impact on the human RNA for interferon by simply using interferon. So what we're seeing here is the ability of S antigen to help the immune system wake up and stimulate interferon production locally in the liver, and then exogenous interferon is also able to enhance that further. So next steps to advanced development of 1467 now, it's been clinically validated that RNA interferons can treat other diseases as well as have significant effects here on some of these parameters in hepatitis B. It's a long way to go. Can't really say a whole lot on 12 weeks, but the next step, of course, is to go much longer. We are seeing significant reductions in S antigen. I invite you to come and see the presentations on what happens with biweekly. It's significantly greater than we see here with the monthly dosing. In our next study, we're in the process of starting is 1467 plus a nucleotide as well as interferon to be able to recapitulate that animal experiment we did, but now in humans, and be able to look at this and see the impact of driving S antigen down and then providing a little bit of stimulation of the immune system there. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Happy to answer some questions later.
Thanks.